It's been an exciting couple of days with the election, but it is also the 69th day that General Burt, president of the Natural Solutions Foundation, has been in a hospital with his faithful wife, Dr. Rima, attending on him daily. As a result of that, we've been putting off new Dr. Rima Truth Reports, although we have some really interesting guests to bring you in the next few weeks. And we've been rebroadcasting some of the better programs from the recent past. This program is Janet Claire Phelan, and it's very, very interesting. Thank you for being with us. Tola, Dr. Rima's co-host, I have our guest, Janet Phelan, on, and we're trying to get Dr. Rima to join us, and we're seeing if we can do that. Let's find out if she can come and join us. All right, will she answer? We were speaking to her a few moments ago. She is, of course, in the hospital with General Burt. This is now the 36th day they've been at JFK Medical Center. The good news is that Burt, despite everything that the folks at the hospital were saying, appears to be surviving. This is a good thing. He is no longer in the critical care unit. That is a very good thing. He's been moved to a regular hospital area, and indeed, he was actually sitting up a while ago. He wants to get up and walk around, but well, after a month of being in a bed, that's not easy. And he has overcome, he has survived 2 bouts of pneumonia and kidney failure. His kidneys, by the way, are back and working again. And there was a thrombosis in his left leg, which was there and taken care of along the way. As Dr. Rima says, there is a place for modern standard medicine, and that place is the ER, the ICU, the CCU, and the surgical suite. And there she is. All right, Dr. Rima.
Hello.
We can hear you fine. I was just telling the folks the good news
Great.
about Dr. Rima.
I can hear you. Say something.
Right here. Can you hear me, Dr. Rima?
I thought I could hear you.
I hear you. Not a problem.
There. Perfect. Perfect.
Okay. I was just telling the folks about General Burt's condition. You can give much greater details. I have Janet Phelan, our guest, on the line as well.
Hi, Janet.
All right. And Dr. Rima, you are live streaming.
I'm live streaming. Well, welcome to the Dr. Rima Reports. I'm really glad to be on the Dr. Rima Truth Reports. It didn't look like I was going to make it. I'm sitting in a hospital waiting room for the intensive care units, the neurological, cardiac, and other intensive care units. And there are lots of people here who are hoping that their loved ones do as well as my loved one, General Burt. General Burt was transferred from the critical care unit yesterday to a telemetry unit, which means a step-down nursing care. It's very crowded. It's very busy. He's in a room with another guy, and that means that there's no privacy at all. But, you know, he's doing well. They set him up for the maximum time that they can do that for rehab, which is first day, which is an hour, and he tolerated it perfectly. No problems, no blood pressure fall, nothing. He's in good spirits. He can't make a sound because he has a trach, a tube at the base of his throat, but that will be reversed. He's been weaned off the ventilator, so he's breathing on his own, and he's doing that very, very well. And things are coming along beautifully. You might hear a lot of noise. The only way I can cut the noise out is to put myself on mute, which means to become totally silent, which is like General Burt. I'm learning to become a pretty good lip reader. General Burt's antibiotics are being cut down because he doesn't seem to have any infections anywhere. His lungs are slowly clearing, although he has a chest tube draining large amounts of fluid out, and his kidneys appear to be coming back to life. Now, all of this amazing stuff that nobody except Ralph and me and the people who understand the impact of intentionality expected to happen. That leaves out all the doctors. All of this is happening for 2 reasons. One, because of the nutrients that I've been able to give him for the last 2 weeks through his stomach tube, his feeding tube, which nobody else in the hospital and pretty much nobody else in the allopathic medical care system is getting. And people are saying, wow, I can't believe how well he looks. My goodness, this is extraordinary. And nobody thinks to say, what's in that cup of green sludge that you pour into him 4 times a day? They don't seem to be making the connection. Then the other thing is that there's a product that we were, I suppose you could say, blessed to be able to encounter just the evening before General Burt collapsed and was hospitalized. And the characteristics of that amazing product are such that it is literally causing the genetic material, the genes, to reorganize and repair themselves in a way that is truly mind-blowing, paradigm shifting. We're so enthused by this that we are holding an investors meeting on the 13th of October in order to raise the money necessary to market this substance in the United States. It's already being used in Malaysia. It's already serving the needs of about 1 million people in Malaysia. It's being marketed in China. It's about to be marketed in India, but it's totally unavailable in the United States, and that's wrong because it's life-saving. So if you or someone that you know wants to become an investor in a paradigm-shifting natural substance, totally non-toxic, that delivers the information to the genetic material to reverse genetic damage, to reverse genetic change, to reverse genomicide, then I would love you to send an email to Ralph at ralph.fusatola, F as in Frank, U, C as in Charlie, E, T as in Tom, OLA, Fusatola at gmail.com with the
That's
subject
right. And I'm going to be
investor
putting, I'll be putting a,
with the subject investor, and Ralph will send you an invitation. Please, no frivolous inquiries. This is a serious meeting. We're going to change the paradigm of health and medicine in the United States with this very product that literally saved General Burt's life.
exactly, Dr. Rima. I've seen General Burt a number of times. I've watched him go up and down, and now way up. He he's his spirits are very high, and we're just so very happy that he's going to be with us for a long time to come. Um, I'm very interested as Dr. Rima has talked about this new. It's not really a new. Let's not say new nutrient because it is a, I'm sure, grandfathered under DSHEA, but
Well,
it is new for America.
it is new for America. It actually was described in the Vedas,
Hmm.
and it was used for about 5,000 years in India
And still
before
is.
modern science, still is, before modern science figured out a way to standardize it and so on. So this is a completely familiar substance to the body presented in a different way, and the impact is literally to reverse genetic damage.
This is, folks, something we've been looking for years. You know, Dr. Rima has been talking about genome disruption syndrome, the damage to our genetic material caused by what General Burt identified as the five genomocidal technologies. You know what they are. They are radioactive technologies, they are geoengineering technologies, they are vaccine drug toxin technologies, they are ag biz technologies, and all the industrial toxins that are assaulting us from every direction. They all result in the same type of damage, and ultimately it's damage to your genetic content. We have been looking for, if you will, a triad of support for normal genetic expression. And we found that, I think, in nanosilver, in CBDs, and in Dr. Rima's metalipsome. You'll be hearing a lot more about that in the next few weeks, but it's a triad of power that is going to
Meta
make a
lipos
difference.
meta liposome. It's
Right.
extraordinary. Meta liposome.
Got it. Well, I'm going to get out of the way and let you introduce the guest, Dr. Rima. This is an extraordinary moment, and I'm
Well,
so happy
Janet
you're with us.
Fallon, thank you. Thank you. Janet Fallon has been on our show before, so we're happy to welcome her back. She's a poet, she's a journalist, she's an observer of human society who fearlessly talks about many of its aspects, including the craziness. But today she has something very different to talk to us about. She has a very serious situation going on that she has chosen not to remain silent about. And we've talked a little bit about it before. Janet, welcome back.
Thank you very much, Rima, for having me back on the air. I want to express how relieved I am to hear how well that your husband is doing.
Thank you. Thank you. Me too.
I I can
Thank you.
imagine.
Janet, tell us a little bit about yourself for the listeners who were not fortunate enough to hear you before when you've been on the Dr. Rima Truth Reports. And then perhaps you'd like to launch directly into what you're struggling against because it's monumental and massively important for each of us.
Yeah, well, okay. Well, I've been a journalist over 30 years. I started out sort of on the traditional path, undergraduate, graduate school in journalism, wrote for some regional, local, and national publications, and then around 2002, things changed in my life. We've talked about that, I think, before on your show. Um, you know, what happened surrounding the murder and the cover-up of the murder of my mother. So that situation was really life-changing for me, not only internally, in terms of my own perception and understanding of what the world was about, what our society in the U.S. was about, what our legal system is about, but it also changed external circumstances for me rather radically. And I ended up fleeing the U.S. in 2008. In 2014, my book Exile was published. I was living at that time in Chiapas, Mexico. And following the publication of my book, my situation in Mexico went seriously south. I the things that caused me to flee the U.S., um, the aggression by police and other law enforcement officials began to manifest very seriously for me in Chiapas. So the book was published in 2014. About 6 months ago, I had a communication with my then editor, Alex Kalmakoff, at New Eastern Outlook, and I expressed to him my intention of going back to Geneva this November for the 8th review conference of the Biological Weapons Convention. I had participated and presented at the BWC in Geneva, Switzerland in 2011, and this is the next review conference. They happen every 5 years. And at that point, the struggles I was having in Chiapas became monumental and unsurvivable. And I'm only going to give a couple of details here. I'm sure anyone's imagination can fill in the blanks. I was renting a place in the mountains, and I would have to go into town occasionally, pick up food or whatever. And it began that every time I left my home was being entered without my permission or my knowledge, and very dangerous things were happening uh, that could have ended up being absolutely that were intended to be life threatening. Um, and I would discover these things on my return. I was no longer able to keep unopened containers or liquid in the refrigerator, for example. And it actually got worse than that. So in May of this year, I closed up the cabin and I left for Uruguay. And I was 3 months in Uruguay, during which time I filed a petition and request for precautionary measures with the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, which basically governs human rights in the OAS affiliated countries. And my petition uh, basically named Mexico as violating my rights and well, violating my rights and also violating the OAS human rights treaties in a number of different ways. And proof was provided to the commission. So this was filed with the commission on July 18th. And at that point, I thought that possibly it would be safe for me to return to my home in Mexico. So at the end of August, I flew into Mexico City, which is actually where I am now, and discovered almost immediately that nothing had changed whatsoever concerning the protocols that I had found myself under. So I have been in Mexico City. I have not gone home to Chiapas yet. I've been here in Mexico City for a month, and I have been attempting to garner some support in the human rights agencies and organizations that exist here in Mexico City to protect the rights of anyone in Mexico, protect the rights of journalists in specific. And I unfortunately have to report that my efforts have failed dismally. It does appear that nobody wants to really touch the situation. And where there might be initial interest, very quickly the decision appears to be made in these organizations that this is not something we're going to be able to address. Actually, an individual who works for one of the press protection agencies told me that since the U.S. is the motivating uh, force in terms of your persecution, it's going to be very difficult for anyone to do anything because we just can't stop these people. They just run roughshod over the Mexican government. They run roughshod over anybody they want to. So at this point in time, I have made the decision to go ahead and return to Chiapas next week, knowing full well that what I may be facing there it may be extremely challenging. My intention remains firm to travel to Geneva in the beginning of November. I sit on the board of a human rights agency named Ithaca, and I will, under the sponsorship of Ithaca, I have the ability to present and participate at the international convention known as the Biological Weapons Convention. And I want to explain for a minute why this is so important. My research and publication, because I'm certainly not keeping any of this to myself, has indicated that we are entering a time where there may be intention by the United States of America to deploy a selectively delivered or engineered pandemic that would only affect the targets. Now, this sounds like science fiction. I would encourage anyone listening here to research genetic weapons, research selective delivery systems, and you'll see that this is not science fiction, that the technology not only exists, but it exists and is up and running within the United States of America. There are numerous parameters under which the United States has violated the Biological Weapons Convention. And I intend to travel to Geneva and present this evidence to the convention at large. And it was upon my communications with Alex Kalmakoff at New Eastern Outlook, who I was writing for at the time, that, stating my intention to do this, it was at that point that all friggin' heck broke loose in my life.
Well,
So,
this immediately upon hearing someone say, I am being poisoned, I am being persecuted, for instance, in this case by the United States, no one will help me. The presumption tends to be, this person is delusional. So, and I know you're not delusional. I'm not in any way suggesting that, Janet, but that is the immediate presumption.
of course it is.
As
Yeah. In
you,
fact,
as
poisoning is classic. It's classic paranoid schizophrenia, of course.
Exactly. So as you moved into an understanding of what was happening, and you tried to tell people what was happening, I assume you were met with ridicule and disbelief and people avoiding you.
Well, the fact is, Rima, I've largely kept quiet about it. I have had problems now with persecution by the US government going on for a decade. And my book, Exile, documents this with external documentation. This is not my say so. You will see police records, you will see court records, basically with attempts to violate the law and deprive me of my rights at every single juncture. So that part is certainly on the record. Now, this poisoning stuff, it's real tricky because people who say they're being poisoned are very often crazy. So
Exactly.
I made a decision very early on that I was going to take every step I could to protect my life and protect myself. And I was going to keep quiet about this because it didn't seem to me that it was going to be very productive to get to start you know going on the air, writing things, screaming about what was happening. So at this point in time, what I have provided the commission is fairly weighty in terms of proof, and some of the proof is my medical records and showing certain types of organ issues which directly tie into the sorts of attacks that I say that I have been inflicted with. So the issue here, and here I am now, I'm in Mexico City. I now have some pretty interesting documentation again going on from these so-called human rights agencies, uh, and I'm not going to them and saying, "Help me, I'm being poisoned." I'm saying that my rights have been violated by certain officials in the Mexican government. Here is the proof, the external documentation that my rights are being violated. Um, I have also endured unauthorized intrusions into my home, which have resulted in severe illness, which is also documented. So all I'm saying here is that what I wrote to the commission was, I, in my request for precautionary measures, is I need someone to guard my house when I'm gone. That's a very simple request, and in fact, the commission has been known on other occasions to provide accompaniment for journalists who feel that they're being threatened when they go out in public. I don't feel threatened when I go out in public. I feel concerned about the repeated unauthorized invasions into my home.
So, what did you do in brief? What did you do in brief to earn the special attention of the systems that are attending to you so dangerously?
As I mentioned, there were two incidents that really ramped up the issues that I have endured here in Mexico. One was the publication of my book in 2014, and what I'm documenting in the book is specifically the cover-up of the murder of my mother. Now, you know that's kind of the substance of the book. It goes into some other areas. It goes into some of my research on biological weapons and some of my concerns about other eugenics programs in the US. But essentially, what I tried to do in the book was to document what had happened to my mother. And that was done again through external documentation. So you have one person who had actually been a government employee. My mother had been a supervisor at a health department in Southern California for most of her career. One person who was retired, who was murdered, and that is the focal point of the book. Although I do go into some concerns about, some attempts to deal with the question, why did this happen? Okay, and the second issue that resulted in this, shall we say, enhanced attention I got in Mexico was my communications with my editor concerning the Biological Weapons Convention and my effort, my intention to travel to Geneva in November and present the incontrovertible proof to the convention that the U.S. is violating this treaty and doing so with what appears to be intent. Now, interestingly enough, and I don't know if you got this email or if I'd copied you on this or not, Dr. Lebo, but essentially I had gone ahead and made my request to register at the BWC. This was done in the last couple of days, and I had just received a response from the BWC, actually came in this morning, in which they're requesting actually, they're not honoring my request for registration. According to the BWC's own guidelines, if you have participated in a biological weapons convention previously, all you have to do is send in a letter with your, the name of your NGO, and that's it. That's what I did.
The consent of the government attempt